Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. As I mentioned earlier, I know a lot of you are caregivers, teachers, parents. So we are in the prime time of bath and bed and all of those routines. So we appreciate you taking an hour out of your evenings to be with us. If you're on this webinar, it's because you, of course, care deeply about your child or your grandchildren or the children in your life, and their future, right? And we all want to give our kids every opportunity to learn and to grow and to reach their full potential. And at the same time, we're raising kids in a world that's changing very quickly, and technology has created incredible opportunities, but it's also changed the way our children interact with the world around them. So, as parents, it can be hard to know what's helping, what's hurting, and how we find the right balance. So, tonight isn't about fear or blaming technology. It's really about understanding how children's brains are designed to learn. And Dr. Ahmad is going to share why curiosity, exploration, movement, and meaningful interaction with the world are so critical to a healthy brain development, and why we're seeing more children than ever struggle with attention and focus, confidence, and learning than ever before. So, more importantly, he's going to explain what we can do about it. I always say that knowledge is power, and when we know better, we do better. And my hope tonight is that you guys will leave with a deeper understanding of how the child's brain develops, practical ideas you can implement right away, and if your child is already experiencing some of these challenges, a renewed sense of hope. There are things we can do to strengthen the brain, and you'll hear about those tonight as well. So, there really isn't anyone better to lead this conversation than Dr. Ahmad. Not only is he a neuroscientist who has spent his career studying how the brain learns and adapts, but he's also the father of three young children. And his perspectives come from both the science and from living these questions every day as a parent. So, I'm excited for you guys all to hear his insights tonight. And with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Ahmad.
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome everyone. This is actually, I think this will probably be so far it's my favorite webinar that I've presented on, but also just kind of the huge amount of research that we did prior to this presentation about what's going on with children, what's going on with attention, and it's historical in, I wouldn't say good ways, what we're seeing. And I'm going to go over a lot of the data and a lot of the things we found. We also found some remarkable trends, which I think you're going to find very interesting about in this area of attention and cognitive performance in school. So with that, I'm going to start. That's actually a picture of my daughter, my youngest daughter, in Northwest Montana, which is where we live. She's blowing a little wishy from a photo session that we did. And this act of exploration in nature, this unpredictability of play, is essential and really the centerpiece of this talk. And I want you to take away understanding just how important unstructured, novel environments and learning are for attention and for childhood development. The evidence is unequivocal. I hope you're going to learn a lot of things from here. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about this, but where we're different is on the data and on the science, not just with what we do at NeuroAnimation, but how we study it. And I think you're going to hopefully walk away from this presentation having a much deeper understanding of what these problems are in society. And they are problems. They're big problems. So with that, I'm going to start with a simple statement that something remarkable and very historical is indeed happening in education. It's one of the most remarkable things since human civilization has tracked development and childhood development and childhood cognitive functioning. It's interesting because society has actually tracked this with great precision for the last actually more than 100, it's about 150 years. Cognitive performance, childhood education, math scores, reading scores, assessment levels. We've been tracking this for many, many, many years. And for the vast majority of that time, cognitive performance improved, IQ improved generation over generation. There were opportunities for children to explore, to become educated. Our food and our diet got better, medicine got better, but something happened in Generation Z. So this is those entering school right around the early 2000s um, for the first time ever. And it is absolutely shocking. Okay, so for the first time ever, what happened was IQ scores started to actually fall. Okay. And it wasn't just IQ scores. It was executive functioning. It was impulse control, attention, math scores. I mean, you name it. It all across the board, these started to fall very, very, very consistently. There's really hasn't been anything close to this in modern history. Okay. And it, we use the colloquialism, okay, people are getting dumber. It's actually true. Okay. And it's true. And it's kind of scary that that's happening. And the question is, why is this happening? What's the ingredient? People have been trying to understand this. We've been trying to solve this. Um, a little bit more on, and before I want to skip ahead a little bit. So these factors which we see declining at a societal level in our youth, okay, especially Generation Z onwards, we at NeuroAnimation, we actually measure these very meticulously. So impulse control, executive functioning, attention, cognitive functioning. We do very extensive batteries in our program that measure these over time, and we actually do follow-up measurements after people leave the program. So that's just something to keep in mind as we continue this. So again, Generation Z is the first generation to reverse a century of actually cognitive gains. We see this also coinciding with rising ADHD diagnosis. Okay. And so it's no surprise. Now, you're having this rising diagnosis of ADHD, and according to most of our tests for not just general intelligence or executive functioning or impulse control, but your basic mathematics, reading, science, this is all going down, coinciding directly with that rise in ADHD. So a rise in attention, a rise in, you know, a rise in lack of attention. And so the question is, why is this occurring? Okay. And a lot of people have a lot of opinions about why this decline is occurring. You'll read a lot about it. Is it because we don't have enough social interaction? Is it the rise of technology, of screen time? A lot of those things are true, but it actually, if you were to boil it down to one single thing and you do enough research, and I can point papers, it is a decline in activities that involve three things: cognition, novelty, and movement. Or another way of saying this is unstructured outdoor play. Okay. And the core of this is this centerpiece here called novelty. So encountering unexpected things, that's really the key. This is a picture of my daughter who's just taking a stick and wandering around, poking it through puddles, looking around, exploring. This type of activity combines cognition and movement in such a unstructured and exploratory way. It triggers the brain in a very, very important way. And we'll go over much, much deeper parts of the science of why that's beneficial. Everyone kind of knows this as a truism, right? We need more play. Kids used to play more. Well, there's neurobiological reasons that that play is so important and why it benefits kids so much. I mean, we are born to do it, right? Animals play. You look at the natural animal kingdom, and you'll see this with different species. Well, we're no different. We're actually born to thrive in environments like this. And this unstructured, unpredictable play is being replaced. Okay. And that is 100% the main reason. There's no other reason that we're seeing this decline. We're very resilient as human beings. We can even weather isolation. other sorts of things. We can handle new technologies, but it's when we've been taken away from this fundamental part of our being, which exploits our brain in a very particular way, that we see these declines. Okay. Now, this is a really interesting statistic, which again goes right directly correlated to this decline. Okay. The percentage of the day spent in unstructured play that involves, again, these three elements: novelty, cognition, and movement. In the 1970s, it was 35% of our day. And I certainly remember this, and most of you in the older generations will remember this, right? You went outside, you rode your bike to someone's house to see what was there. Are they even home? Knock on their door, catching frogs, chasing insects, inventing, playing make-believe, creating games, exploring, building. And a lot of it occurred outdoors. So one thing that I want you to, and I'll get it, all of these things have these three elements in common if you really think deep enough about them. Okay, all these activities. Today, it's actually less than 3% of a child's time is spent that. For most people, it's spent on screen time, okay, on passive receptive information, even in school. The ability to move your hands, your body in 3 dimensions in complex ways while you're thinking, and doing this in a way that's new and unstructured. This is what activates the brain in such a healthy way, and what we're actually designed to do as children. So this novelty, cognition, and movement we call the cognitive motor loop. And this is something that actually at NeuroAnimation we talk about a lot with our coaches and our specialists, that we try to get our clients in the loop. This is the same thing, and I'll get more into that and how this relates to NeuroAnimation, what we do there. So what is the cognitive motor loop? Okay. First of all, it's extremely beneficial for the brain. Okay. And I've talked about this, we've seen the statistics of things declining. I'm going to show you the deep neurobiology of why that is. Okay. So it's really stimulating two really important parts of the brain, this loop. One is the hippocampus, and the other is a place called the premotor cortex. Okay. And we'll get into that in a bit. Now, all of the activities on the previous slide, okay, so exploring, chasing insects, building, just playing fort outside, all of them involve these elements in a very, very deep way. Okay, example, I'm going to give you a simple example. It was in the article that I wrote about my daughter chasing a butterfly. Okay, the first element of this is movement, but it's not just any movement. It's complex 3D movement. Okay, so imagine a little child is chasing a butterfly. They've got their hands stretched out. It's moving in completely different directions, and you have to track it, contort your body. You have to play. There's no way to know what you're going to do next. You're just focused on this goal, and you're moving in complex 3D ways. Okay, so it's not a simple action, like if you're playing a video game and you just hit a button, or you're typing and you hit a key, right? Those are simple executions, or picking up a cup. This is complex 3D movement, meaning your body and your brain has to be aware of the 3D position of your body to do something, and it has to manipulate it in a 3D space. And this is critical because it's that complex 3D movement which actually activates the hippocampus, not just movement. Okay. Even something simple like throwing a ball, okay, has less complex 3D planning in it versus trying to catch something that's moving in arbitrary directions. So try to mentally think about the difference, and to think about how much of that complex 3D movement naturally arises out of unstructured play, which was what we're losing as a society. Okay. The second part of this loop is attention. Okay. So very focused attention where you're not deviating at all from the task at hand. The example of following a butterfly again is a perfect one, which is you can't let your eyes off of it. If you want to catch it, you got to keep tracking it. sometime for, for tens of minutes. So a half an hour goes by and, I can watch my daughter still tracking the butterfly or following a little animal in a pool or a fish in a stream. It is sustained attention that is related to this movement and this cognition. Okay. The next part is really important. It's prediction. Okay. And when I say prediction, what that really means is that the environment is unpredictable. So I'm going to try to predict. So if the butterfly is flying in a certain direction, I'm looking at it, trying to understand what it's going to do so I can catch it. Okay. Is it going to go left? Is it going to go right? Learning about it, right? This is the physics and the complexity of the environment that you're constantly exposed to. Then you make a decision. Okay, what do I do next to catch it? And this is the last part, which is you motor plan. Okay, not motor execute. And I'm going to go over the subtlety of what the difference is. But you're saying, okay, I'm going to move my hand in some way so I can go and catch that. Okay. And once you motor plan, you execute the movement. And then this cycle continues. And maybe you catch it, maybe you don't. Maybe you tried to catch it and the butterfly flew away. Okay. In that, and if you think about things like, building things out of sticks or, just playing and kind of building a fort in nature, all of these have the same level, the same loop in them, right? There's a kind of unpredictableness in nature about finding things and putting them together or building a campfire or trying, right? All of these things involve this type of cognitive motor loop, and it's extremely beneficial for the brain, especially for the developing brain. Okay. Now, what distinguishes that from sport or exercise? Well, there's a key difference, and it has to do again with the motor planning, okay, versus motor execution. So this is a key difference. Motor planning is unpredictable. I don't know how to do what I'm about to do. I have to try something new. In sport, you learn what's called action selection. So if a ball's coming at you, you're executing a plan to intercept. Even if there's variability in it, it's not that you have to create an entirely new motor plan. Learning new things because of a dynamically changing environment is what leads to motor planning. And these are actually two separate parts of the brain. Motor planning is involved in the premotor cortex. Motor execution is in the primary motor cortex. And it's the premotor cortex which is key to learning. And I'll get into that in a second. So novelty with cognition and movement deals with, again, motor planning instead of motor execution. That's what distinguishes it from sport. But also, when you move, it changes the environment. It makes it more unpredictable. The simplest example is if you move to catch a butterfly and it flies in a different direction, the environment has changed and the model has changed and your brain has to now adapt to it. Or if you're building something with sticks and it falls over and then you go through. So it's this constant loop where there's this novel unpredictableness that basically enhances the learning and cognition. Now, the most incredible paper on this, it's a seminal paper where they studied these three things, okay? In one group, they wanted to see cognitive functioning, okay, and improvements. And they looked at exercise, so movement, simple sport, simple movement, exercise. And it had small improvements in cognitive functioning. Then they looked at cognitive training, so apps that, dealt with memory or, like you see these things like Lumosity or brain training games that they're talking about for kids. It still had small cognitive improvements. But then they had a third group that did what we're talking about, unpredictable, scenarios, so novelty, cognition, and movement. So it was complex, unpredictable movement with high cognitive demand, and the result was very large improvements across all cognitive domains. So again, and what they did was they created a fake sport where it involved these very, very complex 3D postures of the body that people had to learn. And they did that, and that is where the maximum cognitive performance occurred. And you can look at just how drastic the effect size was, okay, compared to the blue is exercise, the green is cognitive training, and the purple is this novelty plus cognition and movement, okay, which showed much, much stronger improvements. So this is the key. Okay, this leads to learning, it leads to cognitive functioning, it leads to um, impulse control, to attention, to all these things which are necessary, which have been kind of the bedrock of increasing IQ scores over society history. And then also when we've stopped doing these things, we see the consequences. Okay. And the question is how, right? Why do these three things have such a profound impact on the brain? And it's because they strengthen two things. They strengthen the premotor cortex and the hippocampus. Okay, and you've probably heard these things if you're anywhere near childhood education or the issues that surround childhood education. Okay, these parts of the brain are fundamental to them. So the hippocampus is the part of the brain that's responsible for focus and attention. And if you look in the medical literature, there are many, many dysfunctions and diseases which are a result of dysfunction of this part of the brain. Okay, so it also leads to disease. The hippocampus is responsible for your attention, memory, prediction, executive function, decision making, learning. The papers on the left are seminal papers that are showing how important the hippocampus is for cognitive processing. It is the brain's learning engine. And when the hippocampus is strengthened, cognitive performance is strengthened. And when it's weakened, it's not just cognitive performance, which is weakened, it actually leads to disease. So Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, even in ADHD, we all see hippocampal atrophy. Okay. The other part, and I'm not getting into this in this talk, I do in others, but the hippocampus has a little neuron factory in, and it's so important to keep it stimulated, to keep it activated, because this is the part of our brain which not only leads to a cognitive reserve for later in life, but it's critical for all of our experiences and all of our learning, that this part is strong. And that's something that you'd want to keep in mind. Okay. Now, if you remember the earlier slide where it showed the mathematics decline, that's related to this other area of the brain called the premotor cortex. Okay, and this is another very, very important part of the brain. It deals with prediction and planning and physics. So it enables a simulation, so to speak, of the world. This area is super important for language, for formulating thoughts, expression, mathematics, action, planning. So you can clearly intuit why open exploratory play with unpredictable environments is very beneficial for this part of the brain. Okay. I want to give you a little hint. We at NeuroAnimation, we have now ample and very strong science that we're enhancing and strengthening and even growing these parts of the brain in unprecedented ways. And I'll go over our clinical studies. But one consequence of that, outside of the use of neuroanimation, which would be for childhood education and development, is we see grip strength increases. So you read the literature, grip strength is one of the most correlated factors to early death. And it's not, we don't work out people's grip in neuroanimation. They're getting stronger because their premotor cortex is getting stronger. We have stroke clients getting new movements after years of chronic stroke. The reason why is because of premotor cortex upregulation. So after stroke, primary motor cortex gets damaged. It's the premotor areas that take over. When we're able to strengthen the premotor areas, we see improvements in motor functioning in stroke patients. Expressive aphasia. So we've had some remarkable cases where people who have had brain injury have problems with expression. They go through our program and they resolve it to a very large extent, and they do very, very well with expression. Again, this is all premotor and hippocampal, but it's this strengthening that causes those effects. Okay. So again, to summarize, novelty, cognition, and movement, they strengthen these key regions of the brain. We can call this neuroplasticity if you want. And that leads to better education performance. And this, for some reason, we've taken this loop out of society. Children do not engage in this cognitive motor loop as intensely as they have in the past. We're replacing it with very passive activities, very little complex 3D movement when you swipe things. Think about, there's a couple of studies I'm not going into in this talk, but you can read. I'll find one is, there's a very, very excellent researcher from Norway who studies handwriting versus typing. And she studied it in college students. There's a huge difference between your cognitive stimulation from handwriting on different, papers and different types of mediums than you have from the simple act of typing. Okay, so there's that study. There's a couple of others on how even the physicality of turning a page in a physical book is much better for your brain than swiping on a screen. Okay, so these things, having screens and technology in the classroom, they've inadvertently taken away from the cognitive motor loop. And what you see from that is the consequences. So what is neuroanimation? Okay, at its core, what we did at NeuroAnimation is we took this essential ingredient of novelty, cognition, and movement in its purest, most concentrated form, okay, and implemented it. So it recreates these conditions under which the human brain evolved to learn. So you have very complex 3D movement. You have to have very intense attention. It's a very unpredictable environment with rich physics and dynamics and actually animal intelligence we've created in these virtual creatures that you have to follow and chase and manipulate and move. You have to make decisions. And most importantly, you have to truly motor plan. So it's not executing a movement. It's learning movements constantly on the fly. And we kind of extend that motor learning to where you never fully master it, but you're constantly in that state of motor learning and motor exploration. So this is one of our clients, Addie, and I'm going to, there's no sound to it, but there's a different videos cut together where you can see her. So she's in one of our studios. 12 cameras are tracking her fingertips. And she's connected to an octopus and in one game, a shark. And she's moving in 3 dimensions. So in full 3 dimensions to manipulate and learn and predict and do the tasks in this environment. You see at the end, she actually misses the target like 4 or 5 times. It's really, really hard to do. You have to be very, very precise. The cameras have millimeter level precision when they're when they're tracking you. And every tiny 3D movement you make is mapped into these animals that you then have to manipulate in this environment. So it's this intense part of the unexplored, the exploratory play, the unpredictable play that we can extract and concentrate and have you do for a very, very long time. And it is exhausting, kind of in that cognitive motor way. So, again, so here you're moving in 3 dimensions, and this is really key. It's not simply an action where you manipulate your limbs in kind of an execution. You are constantly having to track the limb in 3D and also the fingertips while you're paying attention on the screen. So it's extremely intense. It's also what's called proprioceptive. So you don't have anything tactile to touch while you're moving the animal. So your brain has to estimate the position of your limb in 3D while you're focused somewhere else. There's an incredible amount of prediction that goes on. In order to manipulate the octopus, you have to understand the octopus's hydrodynamics in the water, its drag. We model all of these things, and I'll get to it in a second, into the animals. So they're very, very complex animal simulations. So you're tied into them and you're moving them. It's a constant prediction on the brain. If I move left, how will the animal's dynamics respond? How do I intercept the target? Then you make a decision, and then you move your hand. So you motor plan in order to accomplish a goal. And the cycle continues. So it's that same loop, that same cognitive motor loop in unstructured play that not only we're able to recreate, but we're able to enhance. So we can even do it better than what you would do in unstructured play. And that's really the key. And that's why it works, not just as enhancing cognition and movement, but as a therapeutic. So it has very, very high efficacy for building the brain after injury. Just a little bit again on the animals themselves. So this is a picture of me years ago. I became a volunteer trainer at the National Aquarium in Baltimore. We studied dolphins, we studied other animals for thousands of hours, and all of that is embedded into the simulation which our participants go through. Okay, so they're learning how to become an animal. They're learning how to move like one. They're learning very novel dynamics and features. It's a constant, unpredictable exploratory environment for them. You really can't do this type of activity outside of our studio. It's like learning a new sport or going to a sport where you never really know how to master it. You're constantly pushed to learn and learn and learn. So what did this do to the brain? We ran an incredible study at Johns Hopkins when we were there. It was a $3 million Department of Defense study. And the power of the neuroanimation, novelty, cognition, and movement showed actual growth in the hippocampus. Not just any growth, but very significant growth. So in 2 regions, 2 key regions, one called the subiculum, one called the CA3, it grew by 4 to 6% and 5 to 10%. And this is a huge amount. Okay. This is in this population, it was actually causing years of decline to effectively reverse. Importantly, it wasn't just the volume that grew, it was the actual cognitive functioning that grew in the client. So the executive functioning, attention, these things improved with that. So again, what we did is we extracted, we concentrated and perfected this neuroanimation cognitive motor loop. So with Addie, which is the video you just saw of her, she came in with dyslexia, had very meaningful functional gains. I love her quote, "I don't guess anymore, I sound words out." So she had some problem with, skipping over big words. But what it was is that fundamental reconstitution of attention, okay? And when that happens, when we strengthen that part of the brain, you get multiple effects that come out of it. Reading longer, multiple syllable words, improve reading comprehension, focusing on reading for longer periods of time than she was able to do before. So this is, you could probably say a lot of this is hippocampal. I think the clearer speech goes into the premotor cortex. But one of the things about neuroanimation, again, is the strengthening it does in the premotor areas. So we did another study, which is really interesting. So you probably all heard how good weightlifting is for the brain, and it is. It's very good for the brain. And there's evidence that it also strengthens the premotor areas of the brain. Well, we did a comparison of the blood oxygenation in the premotor cortex with neuroanimation versus weightlifting. And what we found is that it's 2.6, about 2.7 times higher oxygenated blood in the premotor area. So that is a huge difference. It's very hard to activate premotor cortex, but to do it so starkly, okay, explains why we have a lot of the effects that we see at neuroanimation. So again, I went over those things with stroke, with expressive aphasia. We even had a recent spinal cord patient come in. We were very, very tempered with expectations. And the client actually made very strong improvements in his movement, in his wrists, to the point where I think he didn't undertake a surgery he was going to take because he got some significant movement back. And that would all be explained in theory by strengthening the premotor cortex, because in spinal cord injury, even more signal helps, okay? Even though the nerves are very rarely completely severed in spinal cord injury. So in this case, since we upregulated the premotor areas, the idea is that you would strengthen the reticulospinal tract, which is a separate spinal tract that's more directly connected to the premotor areas. And I think that's exactly what we observed with that client. We had another very strong result with a severe TBI in one of our clients named Hazel. She came in, wanted to braid her hair again. She was unable to do it before the program, and she's able to do it now. She also had a 28% cognitive improvement, which is remarkable. So the next little snippet I'm going to show, it's a video of another client. Her name is Ava. She suffered a severe stroke and had a very, very difficult time expressing it. So she had very severe expressive aphasia, was barely able to mumble before the program. We caught her live expressing herself in front of her dad. It's an absolutely beautiful moment. Our head of marketing captured spontaneously. Sean did. And I have to play it. It's just so wonderful. It's so beautiful.
It's almost like the stroke kind of encased her brain in concrete, right? And these last 3 weeks, it's like chunks are falling off. Her initiation, her attentiveness, there's a lot of those things are really like blossoming for her, and it's just awesome.
What do you feel in your heart?
Blooming.
Blooming.
Oh yeah.
Blooming? Where did that come from? That's wonderful.
That's what I'm talking about.
I love it.
Like,
oh,
the other day she got out of the car and this fell off her shoulder, and she went, "Close call."
Oh.
Like that's not a phrase we ever use. It's just
Ava, it's coming.
Yeah.
You're working so hard. You should be very proud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's another absolutely wonderful example of strengthening these critical regions of the brain. And remember, whether it's from injury or from, otherwise healthy adults or children who have cognitive problems or have educational problems in school, it's strengthening the same areas. And that's why we see such a drastic effect. So again, novelty and unpredictability are essential ingredients to cognitive functioning. We went over this a little bit before, that in sport, it's less about motor planning and more about motor execution. Okay. But what we're able to do at NeuroAnimation is create an environment that's constantly changing in the program. And that, again, is one of the essential ingredients to it. So unpredictable environments, we also know from the science, they're very, very good at stimulating the hippocampus. So this is a very recent paper that came out actually a couple weeks ago, which showed that hippocampal activation increased as environments became more unpredictable. Okay, so this is more proof that we need novelty and unpredictability. It's unstructured play, or what we do at NeuroAnimation, which is a very scientifically controlled way to create that unpredictable variable while you're moving, while you're having to, merge your cognition and your movement together. And that's why we see such strong effects. This is a very, very old graph. I think it's much higher now. It's over 40% improvement in cognition. This is when we first opened our first 27 clients. We saw, as you can see, we see very, very drastic improvements in cognitive function. So 40% is a lot of improvement. And we do expect to see cognitive improvements in the vast majority of people who come through our center. So I want to go over a few more things. I'm coming towards the end of the talk, and hopefully we'll have some good questions. Again, I wanted to bring this graph up again about rising ADHD diagnosis and declining academic performance. But there's something else that we uncovered in our research, which is truly, truly remarkable, which is that the more medication you give is inversely related to math performance. Okay, now this is astonishing. So countries, so you can see the US on the far left, the higher the medication prevalence for ADHD, the lower the math score. And if you go, the higher the math score, the lower the medication prevalence. Now, what makes this shocking is that's statistically significant, that correlation. But ADHD prevalence isn't. Okay. What that means is that ADHD medication prevalence is strongly and significantly associated with lower math scores, but reported prevalence of ADHD is not. It means you can still have high math scores and high ADHD prevalence, but it's when you start giving them drugs that the math scores go down. Okay. Which means the missing ingredient isn't another medication. It's exposing the brain to its natural learning environment, which again is cognition, novelty, and movement. So thank you. I will end there. And happy to answer any questions that you may have.
If you have a question, everyone's muted right now. So if you do want to ask a question, you can click the little microphone audio button to unmute yourself. You can also put your question in the chat if you're not comfortable. Oh, here we go. The activity, is that wrestling or does it vary?
That's the activity in the Moreau paper, I'm assuming. So it wasn't wrestling, it was a design sport. So it was a fake sport where they created very complex 3D postures and positions that the participants had to memorize.
Next question, does this work in kids with autism, especially nonverbal?
Yes, so we've had a few autism cases. One of them was extremely successful in helping with behavior regulation. And the quote I like to use from the mom, which she allows me to do, is I have been able to talk to my 30-year-old son instead of my 11-year-old son. So that was sort of where we saw that he wasn't technically a kid. But again, these oftentimes the ailment will be related to these same brain networks. So if we're strengthening those networks, especially when it comes to emotional regulation, so the hippocampus is essential for stress regulation. Okay. It's directly connected to the hypothalamus, and it downregulates the stress response. So this is why you would see improvements in it.
ADHD, what activities do you recommend? Is it just outside unstructured play and NeuroAnimation?
I would learning something brand new. So it's the process of learning something new and spending dedicated time to it. So if you're learning the guitar, learning a new instrument, going outside and building things, but even it's unstructured play, which is kind of hard to replicate. You need to have that intense cognitive and 3D motor planning that's embedded into it. So, but those things are things that I would do, and I would just nix all screen time.
I'm sure like some of these questions, maybe thinking of how old, the child is, right? For younger kids, unstructured play for like a 4 to 10-year-old, but if you have someone in their teenage years, if it's to your point, Dr. Ahmad, like building something or using their hands and learning a new skill, I'm not sure if that's where the question came from, just thinking of different age stages in development.
We have twins with autism and Down syndrome is a successful. We have had people with multiple issues, and we have seen success in multiple issues. I would imagine it would. Yes, if they can still move one of their arms. The question is for someone with mobility issues, would you recommend they have to be able to move at least one limb to use the program. If they can, 100% yes.
What about cooking and baking? Would that replicate unstructured play for inside activities?
A little bit, but we're talking more about, the comparison is people would go outside for hours and hours and hours to play, right? And you have to concentrate that 3D movement. It's not, you might get a little bit here and there with things that we do, but you have to look at what the real difference was in other generations and this generation of what they were doing, right? And again, complex 3D movement is kind of hard to do. You need environments that change, that become unpredictable, right? That require you to adapt and learn in a very tight loop. And that's that's kind of where it goes. How accessible is this program? Which states? Right now, we're in Kentucky and Ohio. We plan to be in every state in 2028. No, it's not. We are not covered by insurance by design. We want to keep our prices accessible to people, not huge copays, which would happen if we went that route, and we'd have to spend all our money instead of on the research for the people we want to help. We'd have to be spending it on regulation. We can connect with you offline. I will say something about cost. We have never had an unhappy customer. It is affordable for people to do. There are ways to pay for it, and to benefit from it.
And if there's any specific questions on cost, program availability, just any of those questions, you should have received an email from me. My phone number and email are in there. If not, I can send out an email after this. Or I can, you know what? I'll drop my email in the chat. And if you want to shoot me an email to ask more specific questions, we can connect and talk about your scenario. So I'll drop that in the chat right now. Did you see that question? How much can it help post-concussive adolescents or those with sleep apnea if the patient has treatment already in place for the apnea?
So I can address post-concussive adolescents, which is very strong results so far, real world evidence with our people. Also, our DoD clinical trial was post-concussive patients who had a propensity for other things. So for TBI, very strong results, both published, and also for our real world evidence. I can't say anything about sleep apnea because we just haven't studied it. I don't know the mechanism that would be involved, so I cannot say what that would be.
Have you ever treated a patient with cortical visual impairment?
So yes, it's interesting. So we don't make any claims on this, but anecdotally, it's very interesting. We have seen a couple of our clients have field of vision improvements that were cortical, that were neurological vision problems. We've had 5 people have prescription changes in a positive way. So after the brain injury, they had blurred vision, they became nearsighted. In 2 cases, it was a total resolution. They didn't have to wear glasses anymore. It's something we're actively studying and tracking. We don't make claims about it, but if you're strengthening the hippocampus, if you're strengthening, parts of the brain that have access to the retinal nerve pathway, yes, it's entirely possible that that is causing these things. We definitely had these anecdotal results that were a result of the therapy, but it's something that we're just reporting and we're studying. We don't actively advertise that we support those conditions, but it is something that does happen. Yes, lots of studies have been done on adults. We've had very good success rate with a few MS patients. One of them became an investor. She was so happy with the with her results, and it helped tremendously with her issues with her one of her legs. Lots of studies have been done on adults. We see people from the age of 10, 9, 10 to 93. It's equally applicable to children and adults. It strengthens the same parts of the brain. There's no difference in efficacy. No, it's a height issue versus an age issue. So, and that is the technical capacity of the cameras. So we have a model that I think is about 40 some inches. That's a minimum. We can give you the minimum height. But we are actually, building out other models so we could go even smaller, but we can handle a pretty small height at this point as well. You don't need to. It's the total height. It doesn't matter that you're standing on something. As long as it meets the minimum height, the cameras will track it down to the floor.
Any other questions? We got a couple minutes left. I did drop my phone number and email. Alternatively, you can go on our website. It's just neuroanimation.com, and there you can book a consultation through the link on the homepage. So you can get in touch with us that way as well. Okay, one last question says, so outside unstructured play is really what's available to those under the height. Oh, meaning if someone is under 4 feet and they're not eligible for neuroanimation, what is the solution?
I I would still do unstructured play. Is there something that's preventing unstructured play? Because it's kind of the easiest and the best way to do it.
If I may chime in on that, so
Yeah.
we have looked into this quite a bit, and specifically in Lexington, once we have enough number of kids in the younger age group, we could probably set up one of the studios to be for the lower height age groups.
Okay, great. Yeah.
That's
So
where the
it's
question with the step came in. Like if they're elevated on a step, would that then meet the 4-foot requirement?
no, that
No.
would not do it. We'll have to recalibrate the cameras in a slightly different fashion, and once it is set up in that fashion, it will not work for adults.
I would, Gigi, thank you so much for interjecting. He's correct. This isn't a limitation for long. We will probably be able to do much smaller heights soon. It's just, for our technology, it requires creating a skeletal model. It's very complicated, and you have to map that model onto the client. So I think he's right. There's 2 more studios there. We'll probably dedicate one to a smaller height. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat. All right, wonderful. Well, thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you, Dr. Ahmad, for presenting just a wealth of information, a lot to absorb. And we look forward to connecting with some of the people here on the webinar tonight. And everyone enjoy their evenings.
Thank you.